A reading from the book of Jeremiah. Now, funnily enough, when I think of Jeremiah, if I'm ever going through the Bible and I see the word Jeremiah, I always think of Robert Redford, actually. Simply because I saw an old Western film years ago where the character that Robert Redford played was called Jeremiah. Now, I know it's Mother's Day and that would be a nice thought for you ladies, but unfortunately, I don't think the Jeremiah in question was what I would call a Robert Redford type. But that said, he was indeed a very important prophet in the Bible. And whilst right now I'm not going to go into the detail of his history and all about the important points in the book of Jeremiah, I do think it's important, in a nutshell, that I point out to you he was known for attempting to show the people of Israel the fullness of God's character, in contrast to the false gods and idols that the nations were worshipping in that time. In other words, the Lord is the only true God. And in addition to that, and perhaps more importantly, in the context of the Bible reading we just heard, very much like another prophet, Isaiah, he prophesies the coming of Jesus, which we'll come on to in a moment. But just before I begin and go into the detail here, I'd like to mention a teacher I once had when I was at school. Funnily enough, this teacher was also a pupil of the same school that we went to. Now, he was the PE teacher, and we were terrified of him. He was unbelievably strict. And bearing in mind, this was back in the days before corporal punishment was banned in schools, and a lot of us incurred his wrath by way of a plimsoll on our rear ends. But as time went on and we got older and we progressed through the school years, he mellowed a lot and he became very friendly towards us and there was mutual respect. Now, why am I telling you this? Well, basically, I remember one conversation we had when we were sixth formers. It will be considered a very, very unusual conversation between a teacher and a group of pupils. Not all of you will agree with what he told us, and invariably, most people probably won't. But he said to us, rules are there to be broken. Rules are made to be broken. The more rules you have, the more rules you're going to break. And let's face it, people forget things. People get consumed in their everyday lives and they can forget what was important. They can forget promises they made to each other. It's human nature. And in Old Testament history, there were covenants with God that weren't adhered to. But God never gave up on his people and has come through for them time after time. Let's just have a think here before we go any further. The Bible talks about God stating that his new covenant will not be like the covenant he made with the ancestors of the people of Israel. So firstly, what is a covenant? Well, in simple terms, it's an agreement. It's a two-sided promise when two people or groups make promises to one another. Perhaps the most obvious example of a modern covenant is a marriage. Others can include a church covenant, whereby people like ourselves as members make a covenant with each other to actually be the church. And in terms of the Bible, God has entered into one formal relationship after another with various humans in order to rescue his world. Some say the covenants are the backbone of the Bible, and hopefully this will make a bit of sense as we go on. Now, if you were to get your iPhones out and go into the Google search engine and do a search on how many covenants are actually recorded in the Bible, I don't think it's particularly clear-cut. Some say 3, some say 5, some 7, and some even as high as 9. But I think, personally, there are five key ones in the Bible, and that's what we'll focus on this morning. So first off, we've got the covenant that God made with Noah. God enters into a formal relationship with Noah and all living creatures, promising them that despite humanity's evil, he will never again destroy them. Now, we can picture that, can't we? We've got Noah and all his friends and all the animals on the ark, and then the great flood came and wiped out the evil of humanity. But Noah and his followers survived that from being on the ark. After that, we've got the Abrahamic covenant. Here, God enters a partnership with Abraham, and he promises Abraham a huge family, the people of Israel, in other words. They will inherit a promised piece of land in Canaan, and they will bring universal blessing to all humanity. The stipulation here is that Abraham is to leave his land and follow God wherever he leads, walking blamelessly before God and training his family to do what is right and just. And I say family here meaning the vast peoples of Israel. Then, of course, we come on to the covenant with Moses. God rescues Israel from slavery in Egypt and promises to make them his own treasured possession. Now, this was a conditional covenant of grace, and Israel was to obey the terms embodied in all the laws given at Mount Sinai and summarised in the Ten Commandments. Now, this one might be a lot easier for us to remember. We all know the Ten Commandments were held on the stone tablets, and the stone tablets were held in the Ark of the Covenant. I'm sure some of us will know the Ark of the Covenant is made famous by the success of the Indiana Jones films. I suppose we're not doing too badly this morning, are we? We've talked about Robert Redford, and now we're on Harrison Ford, and it's only 11:05. But there you go. Then we move on to what's known as the Davidic covenant. Now, God establishes David as king of Israel and promises him to give a royal kingdom in which the promises made to Abraham and Israel formally will be fulfilled through his line. In other words, God will raise up a Davidic descendant who will build a house for the Lord, and his throne and kingdom will last forever. So David and his descendants must remain faithful to God. And God, at the same time, guarantees a faithful king on the throne. And I wonder who that could be. So just before we come on to the fifth covenant, which is being referred to in the passage here, let's look at the words, "They broke my covenant." The exact words were, they broke my covenant. Yeah, they broke. I took them by the hand to lead them out of Egypt because they broke my covenant. Now, going back to what I said earlier about the Ten Commandments, as an example, I think it's very fair to say that human nature doesn't follow those Ten Commandments to the letter. And then think about the history of the Israelites. Throughout their history in the Bible, they were in exile. They weren't always faithful to God. So covenants weren't kept or followed through. So talking about the fifth covenant then, the one we're talking about in the Bible passage, it's known as the New Covenant. Exactly as described in the passage, this is when God will write his law on the people's hearts, bringing complete forgiveness of sins, put his spirit in them to empower them to love and obey his commands because they want to, because we want to, and make his people, make us a light to the nations. So how's he going to do that then? Well, I think what might be useful, let's look at two Bible passages in the New Testament. So the first one is Matthew 26, verse 26 to 29. It says, "While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, 'Take and eat, this is my body.' Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, 'Drink from it, all of you. This is the blood of my covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins.'" There's another one as well, Luke 22, 19 to 20. It says, "And he took bread, gave thanks, and broke it, and gave it to them, saying, 'This is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me.' In the same way, after the supper, he took the cup, saying, 'This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you.'" So, in short, the new covenant is a pathway to God through Jesus Christ, which was never in place before. But let's summarise a bit here. First off, God preserved the word through Noah. He initiated redemption through Abraham and formed a special people through Abraham. He promised a king through David and then fulfilled all covenantal promises through Jesus. Each time his promises to save the world become clearer until we finally see that redemption and our true relationship to God can only come through Jesus. And just to end on this, there's two things I'd like to point out here. The passage does go on, and it does imply there is no longer a need for teachings, as God's law is written on his people's hearts, and they will automatically know God and his love. Now, does this mean that the children will start saying, does this mean we don't have to go to Sunday school anymore? We can stay in bed later on a Sunday morning? Does it mean we don't need to come to church anymore? Well, I'd say, as a church, we are a people on the way, but not quite there yet. So I think the meaning here is that one day we will not need human teachers to mediate God's growth. But in the interim, we do need preachers and teachers to be instruments of God's work. But this means all of us. Not just the church leaders or those in ministry, all of us. And the second point is, God implies they will all know me, from the least to the greatest, and then he will forgive our sins. Now, it's a sad fact of life, and the reality of life is there's lots of people out there that do not know God, do not know Jesus. And like I said before, it's down to all of us to make sure that they, in any way possible, they are brought to know God and have a relationship with him. And thank you for that. This is the second time I've been asked to do a sermon. If I am asked a third time, I shall make an effort to make it last a bit longer. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for watching Whitchurch Baptist Church YouTube. If you're new to our channel, why not subscribe? That way you can know when we post new content. Make sure you leave us a comment. Let us know how we can pray for you, what spoke to you today, and where you're writing from. And also share these messages with one of your friends if you find them encouraging and inspiring in any way. Hey, listen, if you're able to, why not join us in one of our services at our physical location? All our details are on the website. I'll see you there. God bless you.